Hello, this is Mrs. Taylor, and I'm going to go over with you how to solve a word problem that involves a radical. So number 3 from the worksheet I gave you in class says the formula for the slant height c of a cone is c equals the square root of h squared plus r squared, where h is the height of the cone and r is the radius of its base. Find the height of the cone if the slant height is 4 and the radius is 2. So, they've given us the formula, and they tell us that it is for slant height, which is represented by C, and H is the height, R is the radius. And they want me to find the height, and they gave me the slant height measurement and the radius measurement. And they've also given us a little visual here to kind of help you figure out what all these represent. The radius is the radius of the circular base. The height is the height from the center of the base to the point of the cone. And so slant height would be this distance here along the slope of the cone. So I'll just label it with a C. And so what I can do to start with is take my formula and plug in the numbers that they've given me, because if I want to find the height and they give me the slant height and the radius, well, this equation represents those three things relationships, so I can plug in what they give me and I should be able to use that to find the height that I'm looking for. So C is the slant height, which would be 4, and then equals, and then we have the square root of h squared, and h is the height, and that's what I'm looking for, so I'm going to leave that as an h, and then plus r squared, where r is the radius, so that would be 2 squared. And then what I do from there is I can solve this equation, because if you think about it, if I get h by itself, I'll know what h equals. Since h represents the height, I'll be able to solve the problem. So, first things first, I'm going to simplify anything I can. And I have a 2 squared here, which I know is 4. So I'll start with that. Replace the 2 squared with 4. And then, oh, look, I wrote a plus sign instead of an equal sign. Oops. Alright, so then from there, what we've learned in class is if there's a radical, and there's nothing outside of the radical, nothing being added or multiplied, what I would do to get rid of the radical, so I can isolate h, is the inverse of taking the square root, which would be to square both sides. Remember, to get rid of a radical, you raise both sides of the equation to a power equal to the index. And when there's no number here, that number is understood to be 2. So I'm raising both sides to a power of 2. 4 squared is 16. And then when I square a square root, basically they cancel each other out, and I'm just left with the radicand, what's inside of the radical. Okay, from there what I would do is subtract 4, just like any equation, and now I have 12 equals h squared. And just like before, if I had the square root, I squared, because that's the inverse operation. If I have a variable squared, then the inverse would be to take the square root. So I take the square root of both sides, and that would leave me with the square root of 12, which is a decimal. So I'm going to leave it as the square root of 12 for now, because that's the exact answer. We don't run around. And then the square root of h squared would just be h. Okay, now, because we've learned to simplify radicals, you should know that because 12 can be factored using a perfect square, that perfect square would be 4, then you have to continue to simplify that radical. The square root of 4 is 2, so I can pull the 2 out front and leave the 3 inside the radical. And that would represent my h, which is my height of my cone. Now, normally you're expected to provide units, but they don't give you a specific unit such as inches or meters. So you can just write the word units. And so that is how you would solve to find the height of the cone.